Alabama in a special election, and I think people who are Christians should pray that he obtain the favor of the people, and that the arguments made against him by false witnesses, a stream of false witnesses whose testimony doth not agree, that will be put in its proper place. You can expect that those who want to destroy boys and girls would not stoop to lying. Okay, think about this: you're in favor of a candidate who endorses and applauds the killing. Killing means putting to death a human being, just because that human being hasn't passed through a little and very mucus-lined channel from the uterus to the light of day there on the birthing bed at the clinic, right? The clinic in which this baby is making an appearance is not the birth center at Memorial, but the abortion center in Tri-Cities, or the abortion clinic in Knoxville, maybe one or other in Nashville or Atlanta. And there, the baby's coming out in pieces, right? That's what this candidate against Roy Moore wants. He wants that death until viability, right? Death until birth, right? Death is possible until birth. And if you live in a universe in which that is a moral good and a constitutional right, you and your hacks, you and your clack, are certainly not above, or not beneath, maybe, gathering arguments at the hand of the Washington Post, of very fine editors, copy editors, and bosses at the Washington Post, making charges, finding people to make allegations against this man who is roundly considered by numerous friends, compatriots, co-workers, and subjects to him as he was in the high court, who said that he is an honorable man, always temperate, always moderate, and if there's some dealing he has with a female petitioner or administrator, it's in there's a meeting required. He made a point of having other people in the office, right? Not be in a room with a door closed and you're with a woman. That's something that this very honorable man made a point of doing. Just like Vice President Pence has a similar personal rule for himself, not to be in a private setting with a woman. You know, that's a rule I honor myself. So if we have, let's say, at our radio station, a saleswoman, I'm not going to get in a car with her and make sales calls. I'm just not going to do it. I just won't do it. And that's because it is the appearance of evil, right? It is the appearance of dishonor. That somehow, if I do that, I'm in a private setting with a woman who's not my wife. And I have a lovely wife. Her name is Jeanette, and her name is spelled with every extra letter you could want. Jannette. So it's not Janet, it's Jeanette. So it's a much softer, more graceful, fluid name than Janet. And to her, I do honor, and of course to God. As a Christian, I would say that's important. The first of all, to honor God and to respect what He's given us in the way of blessings. And marriage is no doubt a great blessing, as it can be, though it can be for others who abuse it and reject God and seek only after their own benefits. It can be no doubt a prison and a very difficult circumstance from which one does everything one can to flee. Right. That's where you get all your jokes about marriage and the institution of marriage. Who wants to be in an institution and things like that. Roy Moore is not brought down by cavilling and sniping of the kind that has been leveled against him. And the latest poll, according to I'm not sure which news source, has him 6 points above his rival, the Democratic rival in the special election. Now, Helen Burns Sharpe is a name you need to know. She is a former city planner. She is a senior, when I say a senior matron of good government. And if you go to Chattanooga.com this morning, you'll see her review. It's an ATM analysis. ATM is accountability for taxpayer money, and I find coming on delight in the name of that group, which is really just Helen Burns Sharpe and some supporters. And ATM is the machine from which you draw your green rectangles if you need to make a cash purchase. And you get your you get your cash from the ATM, and in many eyes, government itself, commercial government, is the ATM. We just have to make proper lining up of ourselves and our proper petitions. We stand in a certain kind of circle around the device, make the proper obeisances, and fill out the proper forms, pay some fees, and then suddenly our dealings with government are enriching to us. And she's objecting to certain parts of proposal by developers to develop and extend Martin Luther King Boulevard down to the river. And she sent me a copy of this document. It's on, the title is very kind of a dull title. She should have jazzed it up perhaps, but she calls it Proposed ATM Analysis, Proposed ML King Boulevard Extension TIF, TIF. The TIF is a tax increment financing scheme that lets people use the guarantee of tax inflow and the monetization of future proposed tax income to the county and the city as a capital means. Okay, Americans are they're very Jewish in this. They're Jews, as if you read Paul Johnson's History of the Jews, they are financial innovators par excellence. Many modern innovations have come from the Jewish realm of the world. Right, the Jews were even before the evisceration of the state of Israel, the nation of Israel in 70 AD. They were an international people. They were remarkable in trading skills, and they populated the world. They because the law of God compelled, or should I say, impelled them to leave Israel, leave Jerusalem, leave the homeland for foreign parts, and they have always been an international people. If you read Paul Johnson's accounting of it, though I think Gary North has given insights that to their international genius absent in Johnson's very standard and very, very thorough treatment. Now, the question before the bond board at 11 o'clock this morning, the IDB, the question is the propriety of this proposal worth about $5 million. How is this to work? What is it? How are we to meet our stewardship as purveyors of state blessings to individuals for ostensibly the public good, right here in Hamilton County and in Chattanooga? Helen Burns Sharpe, just to say something about her. You, my listener, should be like her. Okay, she is not motivated, that I can tell, by any Christian thinking or religious thinking or feeling. Not motivated by a fealty to God and a sense of justice. Right? There's not that larger magnitude sense of justice that seems to motivate her. She is just using her experience in the planning field and her ability to read tedious papers and look through documents as if they were just the most fascinating things and make of them an argument. And the argument is generally what is good for the taxpayer and the city as a whole. In other words, what are we going to let private parties profiteer or profit? Profiteer is the angry word for profit. Are we going to let private parties profit and have private gain with a risk to the public? And the question is a great one in our day, because today in the United States we have this particular program, and that is offloading private risk onto the public and onloading public gain for private benefit. Okay, that's what happens around the country. In fact, our national crisis, our crisis as a nation financially, will be reached with that as the main cause. That is the cause of our pending collapse, our financial collapse. Now, she says, let's see if I can try to boil this down in a very handy way for you. She warns that taxes for services will be diverted for 15 years to the developers, and that is at a 5.5% interest rate. The project is primarily the one new block road that also includes a minor residential street, Fulton, and investment in construction of affordable units. She also questions what that means. What is being presented as a $4 million TIF will likely result, she says, in a loss of at least twice that amount in property tax revenue. So she's the loss she's accounting for is, of course, on the compulsory tax collection system. Right? She's defending effectively the compulsory element of taxation of property, which is a matter I'm not going to deal with right now. But let's just assume that that's lawful and good. Okay, let's assume that for the sake of giving her all the credit she's due, that this is it is a bad thing to lose property tax revenue. Okay, whether the topic is TIFs or pilots, she says, or purchasing decisions, citizens want to believe that our local officials have structured the best possible agreements for local taxpayers. You can read this, by the way, at Chattanooga.com. I've got a copy she sent me. Some previous agreements have seemed one-sided in favor of development interests and appear to be done deals by the time they appear on the public record. In other words, we don't have in Chattanooga and Hamilton County a great record of looking out for the taxpayer. So again, she says it's 2 times the loss of tax revenue over the $4 million price of the event. It's a $4 million loan, but I think over the course of 15 years, it turns into a $5 million program. So part of her analysis is on the process of how this came about. And are these arcane rules that an honest businessman should be above? You'd think that people who are capitalists and venture capitalists and developers and investors would just not have the patience to deal with government. But because these are niggling rules, they weed out people, right? So only certain types of people, certain types of developers would put up with this kind of shenanigans in the rules, right? The rules. But then Helen is making the good question, right? Asking the right question. Well, these are the rules for getting this favor, and are they being followed? And it turns out, according to her analysis, that they're not. They're not being followed. And she has 5 points that I'm going to try to. I don't want to read this because I know reading is not. You don't have time for it to being read to, but trying to summarize what she is saying. Well, first of all, she says the state there has to be a state okay, a pre-approval, and has that pre-approval or that approval by a state government been given? She says the city and county seem prepared to put $500,000 into the project itself, apparently related to the apartment units, the workplace, the worker-rated apartment units. Must this expenditure be pre-approved by the state? If so, has it been? So she's just asking the question and then asking, is that a requirement, and has that requirement been met? I do thank you for joining me here. This is David Tulis. We're talking about Helen Burns Sharpe questions regarding a kind of a bail-in, if you will, a bailout of developers at a meeting this morning at 11 o'clock, at which she will be, at which you will find her. The second is, are these busybody rules being ignored? The city adopted policies and procedures to spell out this approval process. She says the mayor's staff could not follow all the procedures because the applicant did not submit an EIP, economic impact plan, and a development agreement in time for the IDB meeting today. It was to have been submitted prior to the meeting of the application review committee. That was November 29, and the publication of the legal notice of the public hearing on November 19. She says staff suspended the council rules, quote unquote, so this project could move forward on its December approval timetable. As of December 4, the final version of the economic impact plan, which is just some imaginary numbers that are created for the city's review. The final version of this EIP, economic impact plan, is still not available online. And then another point is, again, a detail ignored, and that is the number of jobs. And here's where we get the niggling government, bean counter rules that political business, political economics is full of. What about the number of jobs which the applicant estimates will be created by the project, and the wages, salaries, and other compensation that will be paid? This information has been given in general on jobs, and that data has not addressed the compensation rule at all. And then there's a question also about parking and other government assistance. And I think here Helen may be making a stretch, but she's putting it in there anyway to make a point. And that is that this outside the form-based code district, which would ordinarily impose higher costs. And there's another government benefit, and that is parking along Riverfront Parkway from MLK to the Old Giatti Bridge, which created 138 new spaces on Riverfront Parkway. And then there's one last point. So those are the main points in the way of process. Was the process followed? And Helen Burns Sharpe is squinting at that. She says, as currently proposed, the city will put in $500,000 into the private project. The developer would reserve 20% of the apartment units as workforce housing until the TIF loan is repaid 15 years out the term. Again, 15 years. This would be the length of time when property tax revenues within the TIF district would not go to the city and county general funds for law enforcement, fire protection, streets, parks, workforce development, et cetera. So in other words, there's a tax break of 15 years. And that money that would have gone to pay for David Roddy's crew and the public works dump trucks and other necessaries, that money will not be coming in because of this deal. So the city is yielding, and the county yielding revenues to get this to be built. So you have an exposure to the public. Again, an exposure to the public analyzed by the loss of revenue seized from the public through taxation and going to the city. So, you could say, well, who cares? If anybody can escape taxation, good for them. However, because we are collectivists in our thinking, we're all indignant that somebody could escape taxation by such arrangements as this, which seem inequitable to us, right? We can't escape these takings. So why should anybody else? So there is a sort of anterior or backroom equity that's not being honored in this proposal, she suggests. She says, I have a note here, cut tax exposure by 50%. And I'm not sure exactly what I'm making note of in that, but she says elsewhere further down, using TIF for the apartments exacerbates a potential conflict with section 4.7 of the TIF policies of the city. These say, in the absence of unusual or extenuating circumstances acceptable to the board, projects that are substantially residential will not qualify for tax increment financing. In the estimate of appraised values in his September document, the value attributed to the apartments by the developer represented over 70% of the value of the project. So she's saying this is not really amenable to the TIF program because 70% of the building is residential. And workforce, what does workforce housing mean? Well, she reports that this the rent amount from the subsidized units would be $850. That seems like a lot of money. If you're a working man, you're going to want to find a place cheaper than that, or be a commuter, live in the county where it's cheaper and you can just commute. Bring your smoke chuffing car into town, and you're paying $400 or $350, maybe sharing a house or in some kind of duplex or efficiency. So that's Helen Burns Sharpe report. And there's a meeting at 11 today at which she will be found and attending very attentively, as she's doing what we should all be doing, looking closely at local government. Because what happens in Chattanooga is really much more important than what happens in Washington. The same principles apply here as there. Just because it's up there doesn't mean it's important. And just because it's happening here doesn't mean it's unimportant. But that's how we think. You and I are prone to think that way because we're nationalists. We've been trained by the media to think in terms of the large picture. But there is a large picture even here in Hamilton County and Chattanooga. David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3.